Get it, David, come on. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Energy, let it out. 7, 8, 9, 10, a machine here. There you go, nobody works like David in this house. 13, come on. 14, come on. 15, shut that muscle down. 16, come on. Get it, 17.
You don't know me, son.
Get it, 18.
You don't know me, son.
Get it, 19.
You don't know me, son.
Yeah, 20, you got some more in you. 21, yeah, get it again. Come on, we want to see it. Good.
There are people who train for aesthetics, athletes who train for victory, and then there's David Goggins, a man who spent decades deliberately searching for the point where the ordinary human phrase, "I can't do this anymore," becomes nothing more than another line he refuses to accept. He went through Navy SEAL training, became an Army Ranger and Air Force tactical air controller, transformed himself into an elite endurance athlete, competed in more than 60 endurance races, finished third at Badwater 135, and once set a Guinness World Record by completing 4,030 pull-ups in approximately 17 hours. But the numbers are only the surface, because the real story of Goggins is not about kilometers, medals, or pull-up records. It is about how far he was willing to push his mind and body when most people would have already decided that enough was enough. He trained through injuries, experienced extraordinary levels of physical suffering, and repeatedly turned discomfort into another test of his own mentality, creating the almost legendary image of a man who simply refuses to break. But to understand where this man came from, we have to go back to the beginning, before the ultramarathons, before the military achievements, before the famous quotes and the image of David Goggins that the world knows today. David Goggins was not born with some supernatural body or unlimited physical strength. And that is exactly what makes his story so remarkable, because his own biography describes a journey from a troubled childhood and severe obesity to military service, extreme endurance, and one of the strongest reputations for mental toughness in modern sports. After leaving the Air Force, Goggins reached approximately 297 pounds, around 135 kilograms, and the man who would eventually run ultramarathons and survive elite military training was at that time in a completely different physical condition, forcing him to look at his life and decide that he could no longer remain the person he had become. He began transforming himself into someone capable of tolerating what had once seemed impossible. And this is where one of his central principles appeared. Instead of waiting for motivation, deliberately doing what you do not want to do, because in his philosophy, discomfort is where a person begins discovering what they are actually capable of. During his Navy SEAL preparation, his body went through extraordinary challenges, as Goggins has described becoming ill with pneumonia during his first attempt and later suffering a fractured kneecap during his second attempt before Hell Week. Yet he continued training for weeks despite the injury, although such behavior should never be treated as a safe training model for ordinary people. But experiences like these reinforced his belief that the limit communicated by the brain is not always the absolute limit of physical capability, and over time this idea became one of the foundations of his philosophy, the belief that people are often capable of enduring far more than they initially believe. After his military career, Goggins moved deeper into ultramarathon running, and this is where his story becomes almost unbelievable, because in order to qualify for Badwater 135, he first needed to prove that he could complete a 100-mile race in less than 24 hours, despite having almost no previous experience at that distance. He entered a 100-mile race in San Diego, where he suffered stress fractures in both feet and developed kidney problems, yet completed the distance in approximately 19 hours, after which he continued building his endurance through other ultramarathons. This was where the David Goggins the world knows today truly began to emerge, a man for whom distance, pain, and exhaustion stopped being simple obstacles and became tools for testing the limits of his own character. And then he decided to push the limit even further, and that was when the story began that would transform him from an extremely tough endurance athlete into a symbol of what relentless human discipline could look like. Once Goggins realized that he could endure more than he had ever imagined, he stopped viewing training as ordinary physical exercise, because for him, it became a way to test how long the mind could keep commanding the body to move after the body had already started demanding that it stop. His approach to endurance was completely different from ordinary training. Long runs, hours of continuous physical work, and ultramarathons where the challenge was no longer a few sets in a gym, but dozens or even hundreds of kilometers, with Goggins repeatedly spending hours in physical states where most athletes would have already stopped. One of the most famous examples was his first 100-mile race, where he completed roughly 101 miles in around 19 hours, despite suffering stress fractures in both feet. And that result helped him meet the qualification requirement for Badwater 135. Then came Badwater 135 itself, a 135-mile race through Death Valley in extreme heat, widely considered one of the toughest endurance races in the world. And in 2007, Goggins did not simply finish it, he placed third with a time of 25 hours and 49 minutes. But the most remarkable part of his story is that he did not stop after one major achievement, because his career continued through dozens of ultramarathons, triathlons, and other endurance events, with his official biography stating that he competed in more than 60 endurance races and frequently finished among the top 5. Then in 2013, came another extraordinary achievement when he set a Guinness World Record for the most pull-ups completed in 24 hours, performing 4,030 repetitions in approximately 17 hours, while the physical strain on his hands and arms turned the challenge into a prolonged battle against both his body and his desire to stop. This is why Goggins developed a reputation for training that can feel psychologically intimidating even before it begins, because he does not search for the shortest path to a result. He deliberately embraces duration, monotony, discomfort, and exhaustion, turning hours of physical work into a battle over what gives up first, the body or the mind. However, it is important to understand that claims saying literally nobody can survive his workouts cannot be proven as a universal fact, because athletes have different levels of preparation, and stories from people who trained with Goggins are not scientific measurements of the human limit. The more accurate conclusion is that his methods and workload can be so extreme that many highly trained athletes would struggle to maintain that duration and intensity. And this is where his greatest weapon appears, the ability to continue working after motivation disappears, because Goggins built his philosophy not around wanting to train, but around discipline, the ability to act even when every part of you would rather do something else. He essentially turned his own body into evidence for his philosophy. First, he forced his mind to believe that the impossible could become possible, and then he spent years forcing his body to live up to that belief through kilometers, injuries, exhaustion, and hours of physical work that most people cannot even imagine. And when you realize that this man once weighed roughly 135 kilograms before transforming himself into an ultramarathoner, military elite, and world record holder, one thing becomes clear. The real monster in Goggins' story was not created when his body changed. It was created when his relationship with his own limitations changed. The most impressive thing about David Goggins is not how many kilometers he can run or even how many hours he can spend under physical strain, but the philosophy behind all of those achievements. He constantly trains his ability to continue when the desire to continue disappears, and that is exactly why his story has become so powerful for people trying to transform their own lives. Goggins did not simply participate in individual races. He built an entire life around endurance, competing in more than 60 endurance events and regularly finishing among the leaders. While his official athletic achievements include Badwater 135, the Ultraman World Championships, 48-hour races, Ironman events, and numerous other extreme competitions. In 2007, he finished third at Badwater 135, a race covering 135 miles, or more than 217 kilometers. And when you think about the standard marathon distance of 42.2 kilometers, it becomes difficult to imagine the mental state of an athlete who continues moving long after the distance of a normal marathon has already been completed several times over. But Goggins repeatedly returned to the same idea. The human body and mind can adapt to much greater demands when you gradually expand your capabilities, which is why training for him was never simply a way to become stronger, because it was a way to change his own definition of what was possible. That is why his pull-up record looks so extreme. He completed 4,030 repetitions over approximately 17 hours, subjecting his hands and arms to enormous physical stress while continuing until he reached his goal. And here it is important to understand the difference between genuine mental toughness and simply being unable to stop, because deliberately continuing through serious injury is not a universal formula for strength, but potentially dangerous behavior that should never be copied blindly. And Goggins himself demonstrates just how high the price of extreme physical stress can become. His journey does not mean that a person should destroy themselves through training every single day, but rather that discipline can exist even when motivation disappears, because motivation comes and goes, moods change, the body becomes tired, while the ability to follow through on a decision you have already made can become a much stronger foundation. And this is why Goggins became so influential. He demonstrated a completely different way of thinking, where failure does not necessarily mean the end, discomfort does not automatically mean impossibility, and setbacks can become part of the process if a person is capable of analyzing them and returning stronger. Today, he is viewed not simply as a former Navy SEAL or ultramarathon runner, but as a symbol of extreme discipline, a man who transformed his weaknesses into the foundation of a new identity. And his official biography emphasizes the scale of his endurance career, more than 60 endurance competitions and 4,030 pull-ups completed over approximately 17 hours. But perhaps the greatest lesson of Goggins is not that you should someday run 100 miles or spend 17 hours doing pull-ups, but that you should stop searching for the easiest path every single day, because constantly avoiding discomfort can leave you trapped forever inside a version of yourself that you have already outgrown. David Goggins did not become this person in a single day, and his body did not become a machine because of one workout, because behind that image are years of discipline, failure, pain, recovery, competition, and the repeated decision to do the same thing again and again, to do what needs to be done even when every part of you wants to stop. And that is why his story feels almost unbelievable. The real monster was not created when Goggins learned how to tolerate pain, but when he learned how to control his mind and stopped allowing every difficulty to decide for him what he was capable of doing.